Joining me now is Michael Steele, co-host of The Weekend and the former chair of the Republican National Committee back in the olden days when there was a Republican Party that was normal, and MSNBC political analyst David Jolly. But Michael, you were the head of the Republican Party. The Republican Party's always been for tax cuts. That's not new.
Right.
But now what they're doing is, there was always this lie that they were going to be paid for. They're going to be paid. They're never paid for, right? They always just blow a hole in the deficit. But now they're literally like, we're cutting farmers' money and Medicaid. And don't worry, we're going to send you $5K, which when are they going to send them that? They're not even. And if you've lost your farm, well, that doesn't help. Your thoughts?
No, I agree with that. None of it is geared towards the working middle class of this country, and certainly not the working poor. And so these programs which DOGE is going after in the guise of efficiency is really more designed to create those lanes to justify spending on the back end. All of this money is being accumulated to your lead-in to pay for the tax cut. That's this is the end game. So let's not be stupid, people, and understand exactly what the deal is here. This is not about government efficiencies, because there's nothing efficient about what Elon Musk is doing. Secondly, the New York example of the pricing that the city put in place with the state's approval. This flies in the face of everything that George Mason talked about. And there were a lot of folks at the time concerned about an overreaching federal government. So the party that said, hey, the federal government has no place in states' rights, that little 10th Amendment thing, right, where the states get to call the shots for themselves and their local governments, even that's now blown out of the water. That cover has been exposed. So now we have a fuller appreciation of what the end game is here. This new cover of Time out of the White House today with Donald Trump with a crown on his head, that's the end game. And the price that's going to be paid are civil liberties, the taxes that you have to pay for your rights to be taken from you, and ultimately an expansion of a very wealthy class of individuals that will be the American version of oligarchs. That's really the end game here. And across the way, Donald Trump gets richer and richer in the process.
Right. I mean, look, I've long said that, it always comes down to tax cuts, David, right? I mean, you're in Congress.
Sure.
I mean, but the thing is that if you just say to people, we're going to cut really rich people's taxes, and we're going to make you pay for it by cutting your Medicaid. People go, oh, no, I don't want that. So instead you say, DOGE is going to magically find all the ways for it. And they go after stuff that is easy for people to demonize. Foreign aid. Like, people think foreign aid is like, hundreds of billions or thousands. They think it's all this money when it's really a tiny bit of money. But you say the foreigners aren't going to get the money. Here's one of the things that Trump just did a new EO. Stop federally funding work for unaccompanied migrant children. Do you really think that we're spending so much money providing legal assurance to unaccompanied migrant kids that if you just get rid of that, suddenly the tax cuts are paid for? They're not. But the way they're being paid is if you go through all of these people who are losing USAID money. California has the most farms impacted. But you know who's second? North Carolina. You know who's third? Indiana. Yeah. Florida's then New York. But then you know who's next? Florida, then Minnesota. It's going to be farmers in red states that are going to pay for that tax cut. And that's what they never want to tell you.
Yeah, Joy, I love having this conversation with you and Michael right now, because we all get to spit some truths. I mean, I lived in the belly of the beast on Republican tax cuts in Congress and so forth. And I'll tell you a story. I was a co-sponsor of many of those tax cuts. And I remember there was an estate tax cut, or a death tax, as Republicans call it, that I was a co-sponsor of. It lived out there for about a year. And all of a sudden, we brought it up on the House floor to pass it. And I go to leadership and say, OK, now how are we going to pay for it? And a member of leadership looks at me and says, oh, we don't pay for tax cuts. Republicans haven't paid for tax cuts for decades. And here's the other truth that is really critically important for all of this branding that Trump and his doges are doing about federal spending cuts. Nothing, absolutely nothing that DOGE is doing right now would ever come close to paying for the tax cuts.
Right. Correct.
Less than 2% of the federal budget is federal employees, about 1.7%. So let's say you cut 10% of the federal workforce. That is less than 0.2% of the federal budget. That is not paying for $4.5 trillion of tax cuts. And secondly, even if you go after the programs, 70% of our budget is mandatory spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt. 30% is what DOGE can look at. Well, half of that is defense, which are not really cared about.
Correct.
So now 15% of the federal budget, actual services, domestic services to people, is what they want to target. And all they're doing is causing unnecessary pain and disruption and chaos and suspension of services for nothing. None of this will actually pay for Republican tax cuts, but they don't care. They don't want it to. And the scariest part is this. Donald Trump is a lame duck who's not going to be on the ballot again. So he doesn't actually care if people get ticked off at him. Now, there's questions about other Republicans going along with it. Why? But right now, they're exerting a ton of pain on the American people for zero in return.
Right. I mean, and the thing that's been so wild, Michael, is watching Republican members sort of meekly say, hey, maybe please don't cut my Kansas money, but not really fight for it. Right. And you know, the first thing they're going to throw overboard is tax on tips. They're not going to do that. The first thing they're going to throw overboard is no tax on Social Security. That's not going to happen. They're going to keep all of the stuff that's going to help Elon Musk. You think they're going to cut Elon's defense contracts?
Thank you,
they're
Joy.
not. He's going to make money while all regular people out in the heartland are going to get hosed.
I mean, America, the richest man in the world is sitting atop of our federal government. And that 30% that my buddy David just referred to, he's a big part of that 30% in his government contracts, the 17 or 18 contracts he has. Is he looking at that? No. Is he going to look at that? No. The waste, fraud, and abuse in an Elon Musk contract, I'd love to take a fine-tooth comb. Let David Jolly, who sat on those committees, go through those contracts. I bet you he'd find a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. But, you know, what's waste, fraud, and abuse for you is not for me. All right. Correct. And that's the space we're into. So we just need to be honest about this. I mean, the reality of it is the American people are now slowly waking up to this new reality. Yes, even in red states where you've now got members going and quietly, as you rightly noted, saying, please don't cut this program because it's going to hurt my people.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was founded back in 2011 in the wake of the financial crisis with the express purpose of protecting consumers. It was proposed and then established by a then little-known Harvard professor named Elizabeth Warren. She was prevented by Republicans from leading the agency, which led pretty directly to her becoming a U.S. senator and the Elizabeth Warren you know today. In the last 14 years, the CFPB has recovered over $20 billion from consumers. But now, DOGE champion Elon Musk tweeted, CFPB, RIP. I'm joined now by Senator Elizabeth Warren, ranking member of the Banking Committee, who's calling on the Trump administration to, quote, remove members of Elon Musk's DOGE from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, end quote, citing the risk of Musk, quote, enriching himself at the expense of American taxpayers through DOGE's illegal efforts to dismantle the CFPB, end quote. Senator Warren, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
I don't know how many years it's been that you and I have been talking about CFPB. I think since before it started.
Yes.
I never understood then, and I don't understand now. If you want to target the government for waste, fraud, and inefficiency, why would you go after the place that actually has a record, $20 billion or more, being returned to consumers who would not have been able to get that money from predatory companies?
Well, you obviously wouldn't, because this is an agency that is the cop on the beat just to make sure people don't get cheated, and it has really delivered on that. Think about it this way, Allie, when we talk about those numbers, it has found more than $20 billion where these big banks have cheated people. And the agency didn't just say, shame on you, don't do it again. It said, you give that money back to the people you cheated and watched them and made them do it. Man, to me, that is government efficiency.
Now, there are a couple of things here. One is obviously you're invested in your work in the Senate and in your work through founding the CFPB in the CFPB. But there's a conflict of interest that you and Adam Schiff write about here with Elon Musk having anything to do with the structuring or restructuring of CFPB. Why?
So here's the story. Remember how Elon Musk bought Twitter, turned it into X, and hemorrhaged buckets of money? Well, he announced, hey, he had another plan to make more money, and that is he would create something called X money. And the idea was, in the same way that X now gets all of your social media information, you would give them all your financial information and make financial transactions on this site. Now, he can do that. He can launch a financial platform. But when he does, he's going to have a cop standing right over his shoulder, just making sure that he follows the law, that he doesn't cheat people, he doesn't trick people, and he doesn't suck up all of their personal information to use it however he wants or sell it wherever he wants. One cop on the beat would be looking over Elon Musk's shoulder, and you know where that cop is going to come from. It's from the CFPB. So this looks like a really plausible business plan. If you're a bank robber, how about, if you get the chance, fire the cops before you waltz into the lobby of the bank?